plane crashed in the middle of one of the world's most inhospitable and isolated areas. Copa Airlines Flight 201 found itself in the midst of the Darien Gap, the border between the Americas. How could Flight 201 have crashed in this remote area? In June 1992, Copa Airlines Flight 201 was parked in Panama City preparing for a short hop to Colombia. The aircraft operating Flight 201 is a 12-year-old Boeing 737-200 registered Hotel Papa 1205 Charlie Mark Papa. This particular plane had 45,946 total flying hours by June 1992. The plane was originally delivered and operated by Britannia Airways from 1980 to April 17, 1992, before it was acquired by Copa Airlines as part of a leasing agreement between the two airlines. As a result, the plane was painted in a hybrid livery between Copa Airlines and Britannia Airways. In the flight deck, piloting the plane is 53-year-old Captain Rafael Carlos Chial, who had around 23,750 total flying hours, with 7,000 of them being on the Boeing 737. With him is 25-year-old Cesario Tejada, with 3,450 total flying hours, with 1,600 of them being on the 737. While parked at Panama City, the plane was loaded with around 22,000 pounds of fuel, giving it around 3 hours of flying time, plenty of time to reach Colombia. Along with that was around 2,755 pounds of cargo. In the cabin, assisting the two pilots, are 5 cabin crew members for a total of 7 crew members. With them are 40 passengers, making up the 47 people on board the flight. On the evening of June 6, 1992, Copa Airlines Flight 201 is preparing for a short flight from Tocumen International Airport in Panama City to Alfonso Bonilla Aragon International Airport in Cali, Colombia. They left their gate at around 2000 hours, taxiing to runway 21 left. Flight 201 took off from Tocumen's runway 21 left at 2036, flying southeast towards Cali, Colombia. The direct path to Cali would involve flying over the Gulf of Panama on a radial of 149 degrees. However, at this time there was a patch of bad weather over the Gulf, so at 2037, the pilots contacted Panama City Control and they requested a radial of 120 degrees to circumvent the weather, with them requesting a 90-degree heading shortly after. Flight 201 then requested a cruising altitude of 27,000 feet, but controllers told them that only flight level 250 and 290 were available, as there was an aircraft within the same area cruising at 27,000 feet. The pilots chose to climb to 25,000 feet, and a few minutes later, at 2046, the pilots asked for more information about the weather along their path. Controllers told the plane that the weather would get worse 30 to 50 miles from their position towards the Gulf of Panama. As a result, at 2048, the pilots requested a new route to circumvent a patch of intense weather over the Gulf of Panama. Flight 201's new route would involve them flying across the Isthmus of Panama, flying over the Darien Gap, a nearly impenetrable jungle between the border of Panama and Colombia, and also being the only point separating the road networks of North and South America. Only a minute later, at 2049, Flight 201 reached a cruising altitude of 25,000 feet. At around 2054, the pilots started reporting issues with the aircraft, with them requesting to turn back to Tocumen. The controllers granted this request, and this is the last radio transmission from Flight 201. Back in the cockpit, one of the aircraft's displays, the Attitude Display Indicator, also known as the Artificial Horizon or ADI, began malfunctioning. At around 2055, the ADI began displaying false data to the pilots, showing them in a steep left turn despite being level. Pilots attempted to correct this by banking the aircraft to the right, but the ADI's display was frozen and lagging behind, so the pilots continued to bank right, reaching near 90 degrees before the ADI unfroze and showed their real bank angle, but at that point it was too late. At around 2056, the aircraft began spiraling down towards the ground, entering into an unrecoverable dive as the speed increased further. As the plane reached 10,000 feet, the plane broke the sound barrier and began to break apart. The aircraft crashed in the Darien Gap at speeds nearing 1,000 kilometers per hour, with the crash killing all 47 people on board. At 20:57, the controllers attempted to contact Flight 201 as they had completely disappeared from their radar. The controllers started realizing something was wrong after a nearby KLM DC-10 told them about a distress signal they intercepted between the Panama-Colombia border. They declared a full-on emergency after attempting to contact Flight 201 for several hours. The controllers at Tocumen also informed the Colombian ATC Center about Flight 201. Search and rescue began by the early hours of June 7th, with signs of wreckage being found 8 hours after they began. However, as the plane crashed in the remote and hard-to-reach Darien Gap, the rescue effort was hampered. It took personnel up to 12 hours to reach the crash site. As Flight 201 broke apart in midair, the wreckage was scattered in an area over 300 square kilometers. This, along with the extremely harsh and mountainous area of the Darien Gap, further hampered the search efforts. The investigation was led by Panama's Junta de Investigación de Accidentes with assistance from the United States' National Transport Safety Board. Both the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were recovered, with them being sent to the United States to be analyzed. However, only the FDR could be used as the CVR was broken, leading to it only recording the previous flight. In the FDR, investigators saw that the plane banked aggressively within the span of a few seconds, virtually impossible for commercial aircraft. They later found that the wires that fed into the ADI were frayed from long-term stress. On Flight 201, this led to the vertical gyro on the captain's side to intermittently short-circuit. The vertical gyro, or VG, feeds data to the ADI, and since the FDR records data from the VG on the captain's side, it was the reason for the FDR displaying quick, aggressive banks which were less extreme and more gradual in reality. However, as the VG of the captain's side was malfunctioning, it led to the display of false data to the pilots, showing them in a much more extreme bank than what was actually happening. However, there are two VG-ADI pairs in the plane, one on the captain's side and another on the first officer's. In case of a malfunction in one of the VGs, they could switch what VG their ADI would get their information on. But on Flight 201, investigators found that the switch controlling the VGs from which the ADI would get the info from was switched to both on VG1, leading to the malfunctioning VG giving data to both of the pilots' ADIs. As the ADI froze, showing the plane in a steep left turn, the pilots attempted to correct this by banking right. However, as the ADI display remained frozen, the pilots continued banking right until they reached a bank near 90 degrees before the ADI unfroze. Other factors resulting in the crash included the ineffective cross-checking procedure done by the pilots, which led to them choosing the malfunctioning VG over the functional one. Along with that was Copa Airlines' ground training simulator, which wasn't providing enough information to allow pilots to manage and overcome intermittent ADI errors, and the configurations between aircraft and ground simulators being different, leading to confusion between the pilots. In the aftermath, Copa Airlines revised and strengthened their training program, particularly for pilots who were training for several aircraft types, and to be able to identify and overcome intermittent ADI malfunctions and to maintain control of the aircraft in the midst of instrument failures during adverse weather. Several relatives of the passengers also filed lawsuits against Lucas Aerospace, one of the suppliers of parts to the Boeing 737. However, these cases were later settled out of court. Flight 201 still remains the deadliest aviation accident in both Copa Airlines and Panamanian history, over 33 years after the crash. Hey guys, so I decided to remake this episode because it's actually been 3 years since I first uploaded Minute by Minute, even though I took a 1-year break from it. And my school's starting again in a week, so I may be busy. If you want, you can check out the time-lapse of me making the Copa Airlines Flight 201 animation. It just features a bunch of yapping, but I do also mention what my next animations are, so if you want to check it, it's in the link in the description. I uploaded it at the same time as this episode, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoy. Bye!